They did the testing, and now what? Now what do? They all the accommodations, all the recommendations. They could be in a school that welcomes the report and is like, oh my goodness, how wonderful. Dr. Jimenez did testing. Great. Let's go ahead and take it apart and let's implement everything she said. And then we can have this school that says, oh, thank you. Thank you for the report. And then put it in trials. So how do the parents really maximize the information in the report? You can't change the school, right? Some schools will bend over and take the report into account. Some schools will only do extended time, which we can talk about a little bit. It cooperates. Sometimes that's not enough, right?
Yes.
So then I empower parents as much as possible, and I feel there's so much in that report that the parent can use to either pull members, to even use a school that matches better for the student, right?
Yes.
And to implement things in their everyday routine life that can build, not possible with executive thinking skills, but that's a big component for all of the development. Anything that requires thinking and doing and getting things done in a certain amount of time. So, you know, one of the recommendations that come out of your tests will help implement those. So how do you kind of get parents on board to follow through and feel like, okay, we got it.
Yeah. Yes, and I always, you know, part of the process is also raising that awareness in the families, increasing their knowledge base regarding their child, but also stressing how important it is that they're advocates for their children. And I always tell parents, you know your child best. You know, what concerns you? What are your worries? And I will tell you, if I had to put a percentage and attach a percentage to it, I would say around 90% of the times, those mom gut feelings are correct.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, and they're right on it. So, you know, I give them the tools and I tell them straight up, I'm like, this is as good as you make it. So this is up to you, because any other either professional or school will do with it as much as you expect them to. So really, you sometimes do need to be a little bit more persistent and with that attach the knowledge that I've given you to execute, right? So you can execute at home, you can facilitate the process at school, bring in other, like you said, other professionals, interventionists, whether it's a tutor. I do encourage families, like if they would like to also have perhaps a teacher present, if they feel comfortable at the feedback session. So that's a process where I think it's only helpful for the child to hear it from me, because we can give a report, an evaluation, but it could be interpreted, you know, differently depending on who's reading it. You know, sometimes, you know, we'll have a score that came up below average, and they, you know, you can't technically run with that one subtest that said below average and then assume that the child has a memory deficit just because one subtest was a little lower. So I think it's very valuable to have this conversation. So if the teachers have any questions, you know, I do find it to be part of the process where they're free to contact me if they have any questions regarding the report. So, you know, I think that's a very important piece, because if it's not executed properly or as it was intended to be executed, then it kind of defeats the purpose of conducting an evaluation.
Yeah, but I think the first step of sharing it with the team and intentionally sending Mrs. Smith an email. Here, Mrs. Smith, here's this report. Can we review it next week? Here, Mr. Smith, like making sure that everybody gets a touch point, because I'm sure you do get teachers calling you to ask you questions.
Yes, before, during, and after.
They want to know. The teachers always want to know, because just as much as your child is struggling in the classroom with them, the teachers are struggling in helping them. And they're kind of like, what do I do? Bring in the troops, you know, like who's going to help me figure out how to help them here? Because, you know, now all the kids are in a general ed classroom with general ed teachers. So they really, you know, I think they're learning little by little, but they really, I guess your teacher wants to know. Like you're setting up your teacher for failure if you don't share this information with her. Wouldn't you agree?
Yes, I do agree. Now, I will tell you, obviously, as part of the process, when I'm sharing the observations that go to the school, I give the parents a mutual consent of information, right? So that they allow me to communicate with the school. And even though I am obtaining information, and I may speak for other psychologists that conduct evaluations, even though we are obtaining this information, doesn't mean that we necessarily are going to share it with the school in the end. This is, and I always like to reiterate to the families, this is a confidential evaluation that you keep for yourself. Now, only in cases where they consent to me sharing or participating in a school support team meeting would I share this information. But yes, but it is sometimes parents initially they're, wait, how much are you going to share? Is it automatically going to go to the school? No, that's not. This is the family's report for their knowledge. And obviously my hopes, and I do agree with you, is that they share it because it is useful information.
Yeah, but there is a stigma in sharing the report with the school because then, oh, my child's going to be labeled, or they're going to think that, we want him to have things when she needs to work harder. I mean, you and I are in the field, so we know that that's kind of a myth that needs to be talked about. There's lots of kids out there that have full reports, that have diagnoses, that are getting accommodations, and by there's a stigma attached to it, really hurting your own child and helping them success, because your teachers, again, I said before, I'm going to say it one more time, your teachers, you're really you're not giving them a level playing field by letting them know how your child learns.
Yes, I couldn't agree with you more. So I do think it's extremely vital. I mean, they're in the trenches with your child. I mean, do you want a person that is unaware of your child's challenges working with them? I mean, it's difficult, but I do agree. I think there's a certain stigma involved, and I think it's important to diminish it. What I do find, Nicole, is there's some cases where we don't have a diagnosis attached to it. Sometimes there is no diagnosis, and those are the
questions.
Yeah,
you don't have to do anything. It means you can still do a lot.
So a lot. There are so many situations where we have maybe a little bit of issue with initiation of tasks. Sometimes the children don't transition very well. It doesn't mean that they're in the spectrum. It doesn't mean that they have ADHD, right? But we're accustomed to wanting and seeking the label, and that's not always the case.
And I'm going to add, it also doesn't mean that they're not struggling and working super hard, because if your task situation is off, you are working and you're doing okay in school and at home, you're working really hard.
Exactly. Sometimes it's a little tweak of like task monitoring skills where maybe they just rush through their work and they don't check it properly. So that's where we need to tap in to providing the child with that skill set as to how do they do that. So perhaps little reminders, perhaps little acronyms that they could write at the top of their page, just to remind them to check their punctuation, check their organizational skills. So there are little strategies that I do feel those are the cases where I need to really reinforce how important it is for them to seek and follow through with recommendations.
I guess the takeaway is share it with your team, right? And as a team, and know that we're going to commit through this process. We want you to take action with your report. Yes. And the action is everything from class 1 day a week with your child, right? That might be ADHD, anxiety. It might be bringing on an executive functioning coach. It might be bringing on a therapist to talk about emotional. It might be so many things, but at least if the one piece of action and started seeing wins, then so what we definitely don't want them to do is put the report away in a drawer. No. So number one, share with the team. Bring mom, dad, if there's a caretaker, nanny, bring them on board because it's very important that everybody at home understands. And if that's something they can't do, then maybe your first referral is to a family therapist.
Yes, and that is
come in there and be like, I didn't tell anybody I was bringing them here. Maybe, I don't know. I didn't tell anybody I was bringing him here. Now I have this whole report and all this is happening. And now what do I do with it? So maybe the first referral is go see a family therapist so you can.
No, and I oftentimes do refer to family therapy, maybe even like to play therapists. Sometimes, I conduct evaluations on children as young as 3. So sometimes, developmentally, we may be referring to an infant, specialist, a developmental specialist that will be able to work on certain things that are maybe even play-based. But yes, it's a variety, Nicole. It's a variety of different, recommendations that can arise as a result of the evaluation.
Yeah, but we definitely don't want them staying in a drawer.